Welcome to Adelante Chicago. I'm Lourdes Duarte. Thank you so much for joining us. Bienvenidos. Let's talk about the presidential election in Mexico. A lot of eyes on that, particularly one of our own, Chuy Garcia, Commissioner Chuy Garcia, who is joining us now to talk a little bit about his experience over in Mexico, which you went to kind of observe what was happening, correct?
That's correct.
Tell me about that trip.
Well, it was a phenomenal time to be in Mexico. I visited Mexico City. I was invited to come and observe the electoral process and, of course, the politics of what was going on to see if the
if things were working properly.
Yeah,
right?
And if the polls were right, what would happen if the president who was elected got elected, the candidate rather. So it was a phenomenal time. These are historic elections in Mexico for two reasons. One, the voters seem to have overwhelmingly rejected the two parties that have alternated the presidential position since 2000 as democracy began to take root in Mexico. And it ushered in a new option, someone that was elected less for the party that they belonged to than the proposal to make significant changes in Mexico's history, especially addressing issues of corruption, of impunity and violence. Those are things that the Mexican people are very concerned about, and even the Mexican-American community in the U.S. wants to see addressed. So it was a resounding vote that no one had achieved before, winning majorities in both houses of the Mexican Congress, and of course, a lot of hope about the future of the country.
Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO as he's known, has run twice before, didn't make it, and now his third time is sort of the victory here. Why do you think at this moment in time he was kind of an open door to win this election?
I think one, the name recognition, and two, his steadfastness in wanting to be a president and making corruption and violence the centerpiece of why he wants to be president, bringing an end to the impunity that has seen politicians, people in the corporate sector, people in all aspects of society continuing to be corrupt, not be held accountable, and not meeting justice. I think there's a real desire on the part of Mexican people of different political currents and persuasions prior to this election saying, let's give a person like this an opportunity. He was the second democratically elected governor of Mexico City, the largest city in the country. So people knew what he was about. Characterizations about potential for dictator, for extreme type of a rule just went unheard because people have had a chance to really scrutinize the person of AMLO in this round of elections.
Okay. The U.S. and our role in dealing and talking to the president, how will that change now that we will have AMLO in place and his connection to Trump? How do you think that connection will work, right?
Needless to say, there's a lot of uncertainty about how the relationship will take shape. In the first instance, because of Trump's attacks on Mexicans, Mexico and Mexican Americans in the U.S., the very terrible rhetoric that's been espoused by his administration remains a huge factor. Secretary of State Pompeo is visiting Mexico this week. That will give us the first indications of what the relationship will be like. I think the president-elect has been reserved. He has been gracious. The congratulatory and the conversations that took place seem to go very well. AMLO has said that he wants NAFTA to continue to move forward, but at the same time recognizing that it will be renegotiated. So with the passage of time, and especially after the initial meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State and the president-elect, it will be interesting to see the role of immigration, the role of the separation of families here. But needless to say, there is great hope in the Mexican-American community that this will move forward. I also went to Mexico to visit with the leaders of the various political parties, many of who will be members of next Mexican Congress. I think it's important to have that type of a bilateral relationship and to build trust and friendship.
And this is a role that you really want to take on in expressing the views and the lives of Mexican Americans here, obviously, in the U.S., and how the two relate to each other, and the importance that Mexicans here in the U.S. have in the Mexican elections and in rooting out corruption and violence in Mexico.
Without a doubt, people in the U.S., people of Mexican heritage who were immigrants to this country, continue to be a lifeblood to the Mexican economy as they send money back home to loved ones. It's the most important source of income and revenue for the Mexican economy, so it plays a very important role. Their hopes are that the corruption that has permeated so much of Mexican society and its institutions will be addressed, that it will be reduced significantly, that people will no longer have to fear when they travel back home that they could be stuck up, that they could be murdered, that they could be robbed. So a lot rides on it. So there is a great disposition on the part of people both in Mexico and in the U.S. to want to see this government succeed.
Did you get a sense that things were getting better? I mean, when we read the articles here at home where people running for office in Mexico, there's been well over 100 deaths over the course of the last year or so, targeting people who are running for office. So I would think that that would dissuade people from making change, from making a difference, right? From running for office. And have you noticed that or
no?
no?
There was a great paradox, because on the one hand, these are the most open and transparent and least disputed presidential and local elections, with a couple of exceptions. By the same token, over 130 candidates who were running, mostly at the local level, were assassinated, that were the victims of violence. So it's a real paradox about what to conclude. There are many places in Mexico that are very safe for tourists, for people who live there. There are many others which are very violent and insecure, and that's where people will be looking to see if those patterns and those trends can change. There is a great disposition to want to see this government succeed.
All right. Will you be going back to Mexico anytime soon? Or
I hope to be back soon. There are many invitations that have come forth because I am an immigrant, because I was born in Mexico. I had been in Mexico City 53 years earlier to the U.S. Embassy to pick up my green card to come to the U.S. with my mother and my siblings. So it had significance on many aspects of all of my life.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us today.
Thank you. One last note.
Sure.
Approximately half of all the cabinet members that the president-elect has indicated he will make his cabinet are women. This is quite a huge change in terms of any precedent of any previous Mexican presidents.
Very interesting. Good to follow. Thank you so much. Jesus
Thank you, Lourdes.
Chuy Garcia, we appreciate it.